Hello and welcome to the next edition of A Walk Through Philippians. We are in the introductory phase, and today we're going to be looking at the place. We're going to go right to Acts chapter 16, when this wonderful church that Paul was writing to was formed. And we're going to just draw a few pointers out from some of those passages in Acts chapter 16, where we see the birthing of this church. I'm going to pick up Acts chapter 16, verse 6. We know that Paul and Silas are here on their second missionary journey. They've met Timothy and he's joined their band. And it says they went through the region of Phrygia and Galatia, and they had been forbidden by the Holy Spirit to speak the word in Asia. When they came to Mysia, they tried to go into Bithynia, but the Spirit of Jesus did not allow them. Passing by Mysia, they went down to Troas. During the night, Paul had a vision in which a Macedonian man was standing and pleading with him, "Cross over to Macedonia and help us." After he had seen the vision, we immediately made efforts to set out for Macedonia, concluding that God had called us to preach the gospel to them. Here we see, of course, Luke, who was writing the book. You see the changing of they to we. So we know that Luke, obviously in this place of Troas, met up with them and joined this small team as they were on their missionary journey. So they left off to go to Macedonia, concluding from this vision that God had called them to preach the gospel there in Macedonia. From Troas, we put out to sea and sailed straight for Samothrace, the next day to Neapolis, and from there to Philippi, a Roman colony and a leading city of the district of Macedonia. We don't know why exactly, we don't see how they exactly ended up in Philippi, but we'll consider why they might have stopped there shortly. We stayed in that city for several days. On the Sabbath, we went outside the city gates by the river where we expected to find a place of prayer. We sat down and spoke to the women gathered there. A God-fearing woman named Lydia, a dealer in purple cloth from the city of Thyatira, was listening. The Lord opened her heart to respond to what Paul was saying. After she and her household were baptized, she urged us, "If you consider me a believer in the Lord, come and stay at my house." And she persuaded us. And then there was an interesting exchange where Paul rebuked a spirit in a fortune-telling young girl and delivered her from the spirit and caused her not to be able to tell fortunes anymore. And that then stirred up a crowd. And we see it says that when the owners of this slave girl realized their hope of profit was gone from her fortune-telling, they seized Paul and Silas and dragged them into the marketplace to the authorities. Bringing them before the chief magistrates, they said, "These men are seriously disturbing our city. They are Jews and are promoting customs that are not legal for us as Romans to adopt or practice." The crowd joined in the attack against them, and the chief magistrates stripped off their clothes and ordered them to be beaten with rods. After they had been severely flogged, they threw them in jail, ordering the jailer to guard them carefully. And so we see from there this remarkable escape from prison, and the jailer being led to the Lord, and then shortly after that, Paul and his band departing from Philippi and going on their way. So this is an incredible few passages of seeing the very birthing of this church, seeing how Paul was led to this place, seeing how the first converts in that area came about, and then seeing the reaction soon after and what happened to them. And I just want to draw out three quick points for us, I think, from this incredible formation of the church in Philippi. Firstly, let's look at the strange way in which God led them to this place of Philippi. It says they went through the region of Phrygia and Galatia. They'd been forbidden by the Holy Spirit to speak the word in Asia. Isn't that interesting that the Spirit forbade them? And then later on it says the Spirit of Jesus did not allow them to go into Bithynia to preach the word. So we see here that they were forbidden by the Holy Spirit, and the Spirit of Jesus did not allow them. And we may be somewhat confused by this because we know that Jesus gave a very clear instruction in Matthew chapter 28 that we should go and make disciples of all nations and baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Spirit and the Son, and that he gives this incredible great commission with a strong and clear statement of saying all authority has been given to me, now go and do this. And so here we see that God has a general will for us, and sometimes we say he has a revealed will for us, but he also has a specific and sometimes less clear and an unseen will for us, and what he has called us to put our hands to, and what he has called us, how he has called us to approach outworking our faith with him. So here we know that Paul has been given the general instruction of go and make disciples of all nations, but then he gets specific instructions saying not here, but over here. He has then a dream, a man saying, come to Macedonia and help us. And they spoke about it together, and they concluded together after speaking and considering and prayerfully weighing this dream up, that actually that is where God is calling us to. So he has a specific will for them. Now, we can work with natural circumstances and godly discernment to find the specific will of God for our lives and in each situation. There are times when situations are absolutely out of our control, and we can say, okay, Lord, you are governing over all things, and so we can trust that in this situation you have a different plan and purpose. And we can and must then use discernment as well to say, okay, there's this opportunity over here. Let us consider, is this what God is calling us to? And then following that wholeheartedly. So we can learn and must learn with the help of God to couple natural circumstances with spiritual discernment to find the specific will of God for us in our life. Now, I think there's two warnings to take from here. And the first one is that hardship doesn't necessarily mean we are going in the wrong direction. We mustn't see hardship as a closed door, because we know Paul experienced hardship in many ways. He struggled and strained, and he was beaten, and he was flogged, and he was shipwrecked, but that he didn't see that as a sign from God. He saw that as part of the journey. So don't be too quick to consider difficult circumstances as a sign from God saying that this is not the way to go. Instead, we need to weigh those up with spiritual discernment to consider which way God might be taking us specifically. So Paul was also led by the Spirit in quite a unique way, because Paul himself had a different way of hearing from God. He was taught specifically by Jesus. He says, I wasn't taught by the other apostles. I was taught by Jesus himself specifically. And that is one of the key things that gave him authority to work as an apostle and to write these scriptures and to write these letters that we hold today as scriptures. And today, our highest authority is not a hearing from God, because we don't hear in the same way that Paul hears, but a higher authority that we always need to come underneath is the scriptures that God has given us. And those are a higher authority in our life than experience, than natural circumstances, than even the spiritual discernment. They need to be weighed up in light of the scriptures and allow those to be our highest authority. The second amazing thing that I see in the story follows the conversion of Lydia, we see that Paul and his team came to a prayer meeting that was happening, a place of prayer, and they sat down and they spoke to the women who had gathered there to pray. And as they were talking and sharing the gospel, a God-fearing woman named Lydia heard this and was listening to what they said. And hear this, the Lord opened her heart to respond to what Paul was saying. So such a fascinating statement that I think we can't just skip over. The Lord opened her heart to respond to what Paul was saying. There's some wonderful implications for this. Firstly, it doesn't say she heard, she weighed up her options and decided, no, it's best for me to believe in this Jesus and for me to put my hope and trust and for her to respond. It wasn't a carefully calculated thing, but it was an opening of the heart from God himself. There's a wonderful a passage in John chapter 6, verse 44, where Jesus says that nobody can come to me unless the Father draws him. Is that not what was happening here in this very passage in Acts chapter 16, verse 14, where the Lord opened her heart? The Father drew her towards Jesus so that she would believe and put her trust in him. Let's look at 2 Corinthians 4 and see how Paul describes this there. 2 Corinthians chapter 4, and we're going to look at verse 3 to 6. It says, if our gospel is veiled, that means if it's not received, if it's not heard, if it's not understood, it is veiled to those who are perishing. In their case, the God of this age, that is Satan, the deceiver, the accuser, the God of the kingdom of air, as they say, the one who leads many astray, he has blinded the minds of the unbelievers to keep them from seeing the light of the gospel of the glory of Christ, who is the image of God. There is a real spiritual blindness that is over people that requires a miraculous working of God to come and to reveal the truth to us, the truth about who Jesus is. It says, for God who said, verse 6, let light shine out of darkness, has shone, he has shone into our hearts to give us, listen here, to give us. This is not a me earning and working and striving to get, but it is given to us the light of the knowledge of God's glory in the face of Jesus. And this is a specific work that Jesus does to reveal the truth to us. There is a work of his Spirit in us to open our eyes to see the truth. And that's what happened to Lydia. The Lord opened her heart to receive from to receive and to respond to what Paul was saying, to respond to the gospel. Paul says it he affirms this in Philippians 1 verse 9, and we'll look at that later. But it says that I'm sure of this, that he who started a good work in you will bring it to completion in the day of Christ. This is a wonderful thing, because we see in this that it is God who secures us, God who calls us, who draws us. It's not just our own thinking, because our own thinking is here today and gone tomorrow. Our thinking blows this way and that, but the Lord calls us and draws us, which is a wonderful hope for us. Then lastly, I want to look at once this church has started, almost immediately after the church has started, this thing happens where Paul and Silas are dragged into the marketplace. Can you imagine how terrifying that must have been, how stressful that must have been, that this mob comes and grabs you and drags you through the city, and you're not even walking, they drag them, they pass false accusations against you. There's no opportunity to defend yourself or to speak the truth. And then the crowd just gathers around, attacking and shouting, this great mob. And then straight away, without any kind of fair trial, the magistrates stripped off their clothes. How humiliating is that? And ordered them to be beaten with rods. They were hit with sticks. What a terrible thing. And it says they weren't just flogged, but they were severely flogged. And then thrown into prison. And this is a remarkable thing. We think that when the gospel comes, that it's all going to be this bed of roses, but that's not the truth. Sometimes life gets harder when the gospel comes and when we accept the gospel. But we see the church didn't fall apart at this moment. The church didn't get scared and everyone run away and go and renounce Christ and give up. But the church actually continued to grow. We see the great miracle of the jailer being converted, and we see the church established and continue to grow in that. The church didn't fall over and die at that point, but it actually continued to grow and continued to thrive. We need to, as Christians, when we see things like this, reframe our thinking with regards to hardships, to difficulties, even to persecution, when we just don't fit in with the world, when we butt heads with the world, and when we are persecuted or restricted or cast aside in some way because of our faith. We must put aside thoughts of woe is me when this happens, and we need to remember and look to this as an example even of seeing how flourishing happens, how the church growth happens. We see the very reason this gospel spread beyond Jerusalem was because of the persecution broke out against the church after Stephen's stoning, and the church was spread far and wide, and the gospel then continued to grow. Hardship and difficulties is where the rubber hits the road of our faith. James 1 encourages us to rejoice in hardships, because those hardships produce a perseverance, and it produces a maturity and a fulfillment of our faith. We need to remember this as we experience these hardships, as we experience difficulties, and we may never experience that level of difficulty, but we all go through hardships. We all go through various trials and challenges, and we see James encouraging us to consider it a great joy. This is a counterintuitive way of thinking, that we need God to help us. And that's why he said, if any of you lacks wisdom, he should ask God, who gives generously and ungrudgingly, and it will be given to him. What a great thing we can ask for. As we look at the story, there are many counterintuitive things happening. How Paul was led there, how Lydia came to understand and see the truth, and then how the church responded to hardships and to these various trials they faced in that moment. So we need to ask God, who gives wisdom generously, and he will give it to us. And we need to believe and trust that he will give us wisdom to understand and to perceive these things. So my prayer for you and for me is that we would ask God for wisdom, how to discern these moments, to discern these situations, to discern his specific will for us, how to discern the very way that we came to know him, and how to discern when we face trials and difficulties. And my prayer is that as we discern that, we would see clearer and clearer God's revealed and specific will for our life. God bless you, and we'll see you next time.